1 minute in. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to this week's webinar with my co-founder Pascal and myself. And we're going to talk about artificial intelligence in strategy and strategy execution. It's basically Workpath's home turf. And we're going to talk a little bit about the bigger picture. Artificial intelligence, not just in our domain of expertise, but also what we see in different kind of enterprises, how it's being used already, what are the opportunities, but also the limitations and risks. But before we jump into that, we start with a short introduction. For those of you who don't know us yet, my name is Johannes, one of the co-founders of Workpath. How Pascal and I distribute our responsibilities is I'm more focused on our customer success and our revenue team. So I'm working very, very closely with our customers, involved in rollouts, working with leadership teams on a day-to-day basis. And Pascal is a bit more focused on the product side of things. Pascal, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Nice to meet you as well. My role is a bit more focused, as Johannes said, on product and engineering, but also jointly work with customers a lot, and especially in pioneering new technologies like AI, and always thinking about how can we use these new technologies to solve the current problems even better and address those. And I'm excited to give you also a glimpse and a preview into what we're building and share a bit about our knowledge and invite you to this exchange. We're also curious to hear your thoughts on it. And with that, let's get into it.
Exactly. As said, we're going to start with a state of AI from a B2B, from an enterprise perspective. We're going to focus on use cases, opportunities, risks, limits, and first steps applying AI in strategy and strategy execution. And in the end, we're going to wrap it up and try to give you some early entry points and some first steps for yourself experimenting with technology in our joint space. For those of you who don't know us yet, what is Workpath? We founded Workpath because of what you see here. Strategy execution is flawed. The majority of goals in companies is never achieved as planned. No matter whom you ask, which consultancy, which researcher, quite consistently between 60 and 80% of strategic goals are never really fully implemented. Less than 60% of the economic value of strategy usually gets leveraged, and that's why we exist. That's what we set out to solve when we founded Workpath a couple of years ago. It's our mission to enable teams to define and achieve their most important goals. And the more we gather insights and data, the longer we work with large organizations, the easier it is for us to really validate the business impact we have. We're going to talk about the kind of data we use. We can leverage with our technology and with AI. And something we're really proud of is to show that teams that work with Workpath for some time, that implement certain kind of behaviors in the strategy and strategy execution process, are on average up to 35–40%, sometimes even more effective with their goal achievement. And that's our business impact. That's what we stand for. It's not going to be a product pitch of the whole platform today. So it's really just so you've heard about it if you've never heard of Workpath before. In the end, what Workpath provides is a software as a service platform, a strategy execution platform for teams to plan, to collaborate around their most important goals, to define goals, to align themselves around goals, to execute towards goals. And the one thing that really defines Workpath is outcome centricity. We help organizations to make everything they do, all planning, all collaboration processes really focused on outcomes, which is why we also call outcome management. And the last thing, we're pretty focused on large organizations, which is great also for AI. And it's important, I think from first day on, it was important for us not just to provide a software. What we do is change. It's about making change happen with people. So I think what always has set us apart is that we invested a lot into professional services, into training and enablement, working with people. So whenever you work with Workpath, you don't just buy technology, you buy into this whole ecosystem of enablement and change, of content, of a community in the end. That's something we really invest a lot into. And I think with that, let's kick it off with a couple of questions so we get a sense for who's in the room and also what's your previous experiences with AI? Where do you stand? And then that will also help us a little bit which sections of today we're gonna go a bit deeper in, and where we might be faster because everyone already knows a bit about it.
Yes, and the first question we'd like to ask is, how much do you already know about AI? And as you can see, there's a poll now in the comment section. You can also answer with comments if you like. We'll also send around the slides of this presentation, including also the summary and the votes in the end. So you also have that as a takeaway. It seems like majority so far is on the advanced level, using AI tools a couple of times, but still keep learning about it. That's great. Then next question, how often do you already use AI applications like ChatGPT or others in your work context today? So how often do you actually apply those applications? And there's a trend to daily, but also a couple of votes coming in for a few times a month, only once or twice. Okay, so very diverse set. That's interesting. Then third question, where do you stand today with the usage of AI in your organization or team? So how much AI has been rolled out to your organization or to your teams? How widespread do you say it is? Maybe you have own products that incorporate AI or use it internally for processes. Right, so it seems like some are already using it quite a bit, have integrated into it, but a lot of pilot projects. I think that's and exploring possibilities, and maybe you will take something away from this webinar with the insights gained today. And last but not least, what are the biggest challenges introducing AI in your organization, especially if you're exploring already possibilities or have already projects? I'll pause here for a second because it's a couple of options, but I think that will be also super interesting for the group here to understand what are the biggest challenges that we collectively face. For this question, you can also add multiple answers or click on multiple answers. Okay, and this is also quite widespread across the options, from finding the right solutions and challenging that, having maybe not the right understanding or the depth of understanding necessary yet, but also privacy, security concerns, and integrating also with existing processes and systems. Great. I think that gives us a good.
By the way, we're also going to share the results once we share the slides afterwards. So you'll also get that kind of overview. And as I said, this will also help us now navigate a little bit where we do the deep dives and where we might be a bit quicker. So let's start with a look at the state of AI in enterprise. Why do we talk about this today? I mean, we at Workpath, we've been experimenting with AI, I think, for the last couple of years already, but only last year in 2023, you had some breakthrough moments with OpenAI and ChatGPT being the fastest product ever to reach more than 100 million regular users. You see all of those logos, all of those products we know, but how long it took them to get that kind of distribution. And of course, a lot of people say this might be a hype, but there is something to it. And a lot of people in our industry, a lot of people in technology think there is this catalyst moment right now where a lot is happening at the same time and where things still keep accelerating. You see it all over the news, right? The New York Times called 2024 as the big AI leap, where a lot of things will happen and come to life. German newspaper Spiegel. One of the founders of DeepMind, driver of AI at Google, says this will be the most productive decade of humankind, basically, because of AI. But at the same time, also particularly in Europe, that's the part where a lot of Americans then joke about. We talk about regulation, we talk about limits. Just this week on Tuesday, there was a first agreement in the European Parliament to actually sign off the AI Act, where regulation comes quite heavily into some industries at least. And it defines, like GDPR, how a lot of us work, how we build products, and how we collaborate with each other. So it's just a lot going on right now. And what we want to start with is really giving a general overview, because it's a real jungle, right? I mean, you have those hype cycles. There was a AI winter for a long time. So AI is definitely not a new topic. And only the last 2 years, as I said, all of these terms, all these buzzwords are all around us. And we want to give some kind of a structure to start with and to have a common understanding of what we're talking about today. And I think Pascal is the best person, at least in our company, to give you a short overview how we look at the space, how we look at some foundational models and products, which ultimately we at Workpath also work with then.
Yes, so as you can categorize all these different terms, all of them fit in the box of artificial intelligence. Most recently, the generative AI components have been seen quite a traction, and specifically the foundation models that have been introduced, like the large language models from GPT-4, Gemini, Llama, but also other models that sort of build the foundation. And why they call foundational models, because all of the applications or several applications are built on top of these models that understand either language or text, as well as images, etc. And so from a perspective, there are a couple of AI foundation model providers, such as OpenAI, probably the most prominent one, but also Mistral, Aleph Alpha here in Germany, but also Meta, AWS, Google. Like, everybody's building large language models and foundational models that then AI applications such as ChatGPT, Pika 11 Labs are built upon, and other software solutions are infused with AI, so to speak, are empowered with AI, such as the MS 365 Copilot or Figma, GitHub Copilot, or our Workpath AI. So that's a little bit of the landscape, maybe to point that out in the AI space. And as mentioned before, there are a couple of different AI foundation models. For example, one's around text and language. So you can translate languages from A to B. You can generate a lot of text. You can do semantic analysis on those, so they really understand text. But there's also the same for audio, so text to speech, audio to audio, for vision, for detecting objects or masks, making other images, generating images based on text input. But then also around data and analytics, understanding data, analyzing data, generating even data, test data, or transforming data. And then there's most recently also been quite some interest in multimodal models that, for example, can take text to images or images to videos, because they combine different of these foundational models into new ones, and then can make really good use of the interconnection between those. And I think those are the ones that are also closely to watch. And as an example, ChatGPT, you probably all know it, where you answer text-based prompts, and ChatGPT understands, based on the large language model that it's built on, what the user is asking for. For example, explain me the difference between OKRs and KPIs, and can, based on the vast amount of training data sets, understand and predict, so to speak, the answer to you. Over the last 50 to 80 years, we've seen also a lot of traction, a lot of different systems being introduced. So while it's especially interesting what changes were brought in the last recent years, it actually goes back to a very, very long time. And what you can see here is a logarithmic scale in the number of parameters that these AI systems are trained on. And on the x-axis, the time that they were launched. And as you can see, even on this logarithmic scale here, on the y-axis, the number of parameters that are used to build and train these models on, that's why they're also called large language models, is just increasingly by the day, pretty much. And you have through this training, through analyzing the entire internet, for example, for these language models, and using a lot of information in a text-based format and using billions of parameters, some even going to trillions of parameters now. This helps to build a really, really robust understanding of language across different geographies, and then use that to predict the right next answer, the right next character and word.
You can see some big brands in there, right? You can see the YouTube video recommendation system, for example. You can see here, if you only zoom in on language, GPT-3. So as Pascal said, huge volumes of data is what it's all about. And I think also on the previous slide, you could already see foundation models, who's behind them. There's only very few companies in the world that can combine, on the one hand, the technology, who have the talent to build the kind of foundation models, but even more important, probably have access to these huge amounts of data. And I think that's one thing to always have in mind. AI seems like a technology that makes the big ones even more powerful. And of course, this influences how we need to think about independence and redundancies when we build technology based on it. We need to think about regulation, and we need to also think like, how can we foster and nurture innovation in that space, because ultimately it's driven by a few very big companies we already all know, the Google, Microsoft, Amazon, etc. So a couple of examples just before we go into limits and opportunities working with with AI in the space. What kind of data do we have? Yeah, so Workpath uses foundation models like from OpenAI, and then we use this trained model basically to combine it with the data in individual customers in individual organizations. So it's not like we're analyzing all customer data and train the model, but it's always separate instances. And of course, only if an organization wants to do that. But an example of what kind of data we have, a lot around KPIs, who owns KPIs, how do KPIs relate to each other, around customers, who benefits, what kind of value is created for what kind of customers in an organization that's defined in goals, in OKRs, in outcomes, and of course, cross-functional collaboration. Yeah, who depends on whom, who contributes where. This is all really interesting, continuously generated data that we can use for better product and in the end, better strategy execution. We'll come to that in a moment in a bit more detail when we look at some use cases, what Workpath does.
Yes, and so when deciding, and I think this was also one of the questions that we answered, and a couple of you were curious about like how can I get started, what are the first steps, and what should I maybe pay attention to. I think we brought together a couple of opportunities and strengths, as well as risks and limitations that can give you also a little bit of starting point, a practical interest for how to get started with this. So I think on the opportunities and strengths side, AI is obviously very famous for operational efficiency and automating routine tasks. That's a clear benefit that you see across basically the entire market. But it also is especially powerful when it comes to personalizing and customizing different insights, experiences, supporting decisions, or even being a driver for innovation, coming up with new ideas, also especially in the content space, where it can be applied to generate first, for example, content drafts, generate a lot of information and a lot of content in itself. However, on the risks and limitations side, I think we also, with AI especially, we always need to focus on how do we make it secure? How do we make sure that our data, our proprietary rights are not disclosed unwantedly or unexpectedly to any third party? We also need to make sure that, or be reflective about the topic that the data is always generated, right? It can also lead to hallucinations even, and it's oftentimes, and I think AI is getting better at that, especially the large language model providers, that was once trained, but it doesn't mean that this new information that comes in on a regular basis is necessarily implemented in part of that knowledge. Of course, you always have a very often find a domain knowledge, so it's very focused or specific on one particular part and then be really good at it. And of course, when you apply, and especially for those who have pilot projects out there, the topic of traceability and reproducibility of results is always a challenge, because as you can imagine, an AI that generates new content every time you ask it and never repeats itself is great for being innovative, coming up with new content, for example, but it also makes it incredibly hard to trace back and reproduce results if you want to, for example, debug or change or understand what recommendations your AI systems is going out. And last but not least, while it's quite cheap overall, there's of course also the aspect of cost, especially also in terms of energy that is consumed around the world globally. In that it takes a lot of energy to run those systems, to train those systems, but especially and also on an ongoing basis used to even do very minor tasks. And I think there's going to be a couple of new models going out there that are focusing on cost efficiency, even or energy efficiency, in order to tackle this. So our practical approach and our recommendation would be that when getting started and thinking about how can I leverage AI in my organization, first understanding what AI is about, what AI excels at, then focus on the actual problems and use cases you want to solve. I think that's, if there's one takeaway, then let it be this one. Focus on the problems, on the customer problems that you want to solve and the use cases that you have, and then think about how you can apply AI's strengths on it. And with that, I think that's the good foundation. And from that point on, you can experiment and start. And we recommend starting small. Take one particular part where you can get quick understanding, can quick feedback loops, and iterate from then on.
And by the way, this little guide, I think, is helpful for not just starting your own experiments with AI, but also when you consider buying tools that are enhanced with AI. It's, I think, really about demystifying it. In the end, it's a technology, it's a tool, it's there to solve problems. And for certain problems, it's great. For certain, it's not great at all. And I think that's something we see working with our customers, particularly the big tech players. They try to sell a lot in that context now, but there's also some, first realizations maybe that the technology might be not there yet, or the promised value is not worth the price that is being charged for it, because there's a price to it always, and particularly with the hype, a lot of companies try to monetize that right now. And you can see this, right? I think it's realizations, the first kind of experiments and experiences companies make themselves, but you can see it also all over the news and in different kind of surveys. BlackBerry just recently did a survey where they show that more than 70% of companies actually are either considering to ban different AI products like ChatGPT or already have banned. And about 2/3 of them think this is a long time thing. So I think a lack of transparency, what's happening with my data, a lack of trust with the players behind, and also just no real sense what's the business case, what's the business value, where could it take us compared to the risks. I think that's what we hear a lot when we talk to companies, when we talk to particularly decision makers in that space, when we meet with CIOs who have to make that decision, who, for example, have to decide if they suddenly want to pay double to use Microsoft's Copilot. I think there are some companies out there who realize there's also a little bit of myth and hype around that they don't want to work for or don't want to pay for at least. So what should you do when you want to start working with AI in your company? I think that's true for every technology again, but here particularly to work very closely with IT and legal, work with people, representatives, HR, to make sure everyone sits at the table. I think that's a no-brainer. There's different setups, as you will see in a moment. Microsoft Azure in the cloud provides actually a pretty safe and stable setup how you can apply AI in your organization without being connected to external parties, with probably the highest level of stability, security, and trust you can have. And last but not least, I think that's the thing I would highlight on that slide, to not repeat what Pascal just said, the people and culture perspective. I think there's good research how AI does, yes, automate work and might replace some roles, some jobs in the midterm, but in most job categories, in most industries, it's more about how can you leverage people, how can you increase productivity with those tools. And I think it's a lot about communicating and enabling people, enabling employees to work with AI. It's about AI literacy, so everyone is protected. Everyone can deal with fake content, for example, which is a huge result of the distribution of AI tools right now, but also feels enabled to use these tools and really sees how they can translate it into their everyday work. So it's a huge enablement effort. Companies can benefit, but you really have to invest in the beginning. I think the one thing I'm just convinced of in that context is there's no way around it, right? It is coming, and we don't have to blow up the hype even further, but companies need to react to some extent, because you don't want to be the company that doesn't work with those kind of tools that soon will be there in most jobs and companies out there. A quick look at how we set this up. When Workpath uses AI, we have a contract with Microsoft and AWS. So all data of our customers is exclusively stored in the respective country, most of it in Germany for our German customers, just as an example. You can see in the Microsoft Azure AI service terms how it is restricted. So they set it up in a way that, as I said, there is no connection to external parties, and you can really use your local model with your data only. And in addition, we also signed an agreement with Microsoft to make sure they cannot, even for certain kind of security and fraud protection efforts, etc., they cannot take data or analyze data in any scenario. Because if you look closely, and that's one recommendation, look very closely at those terms and conditions. Microsoft has the right officially to have a look at data, to analyze data, to retain data, but there's ways, and we've taken that path to come to an agreement with Microsoft to make sure it's really protected, and there's no way anyone, including Microsoft, can read or analyze, can retain data you're working with there. I think just as an example, that's something I think a good hint for any kind of tool, any kind of provider that works with AI to look very closely there.
Yes, and so this is like the architecture that we also follow on, in that we have AI services that interconnect with Azure Cloud, for example, where we use their GPT-4 model and then serve this as part of our application, part of our software, back to the user, the customer interacting with it. Then to the second part, what we also like to look at, now that we have given a bit of context about the state of AI, especially in the enterprise segment, we also want to look at how can you apply AI in the strategic planning and strategy execution. And we want to start with that by maybe just quickly refining or defining strategy. What is strategy in the first place? And starting important here, strategy is about defining and communicating the company's unique position, making trade-offs, and forging fit among activities. And so the question could now be raised, like, how can you use AI that is trained on existing publicly available data to come up with a good strategy or good strategy execution, for that matter? And that's the no-brainer question that pops up when you probably read about the webinar as well. And so the general opinion in the executive community right now is that AI cannot independently define a strategy or replace important strategic roles and owners of strategy. It cannot come up on its own with a unique position, with the trade-offs. It cannot make the decisions which activities to pursue and which not. But it can serve as a powerful technology to enable and enhance these decisions and enhance the roles, and be used across the entire cycle to help steer and make these decisions around which path or which activities to pursue, how is a position X, Y, or Z, come up with new positions, maybe come up with better trade-offs.
And that view, I think it also shows in the numbers. If you ask executives, I think that was a study being done by McKinsey, only about 7% of executives say they use AI and they see AI use cases in strategy or even in financial planning, while in other functions like marketing or operations, this is rather between 25 and 30% already. So pretty much what Pascal said, you can see it. It's not very mature, and there seems to be a strong opinion among many that strategy is like one of the most creative, integrative, and conceptual practices where you need to make bold bets, where you need to make, like, humans need to make decisions and stand up for them. So automation use cases might be less obvious for many strategists, for many in strategy roles. But I think what we see when talking to executives and leadership teams is that a lot of them just look too far into the future, right? The idea of a fully automated process where a computer defines your strategy, makes the decisions, and you basically don't have to do anything, that's very far in the future, and we don't know if we ever get there, and we should get there. But there is different building blocks of strategy, a strategy process, and a strategy execution model where AI, of course, can have tremendous impact. Yeah? We really like this model of 6 levels or 6 stages of AI in the context of strategy work. And I think you see the first part, descriptive intelligence, just simple analytics, dashboards about competitive performance, for example, that automatically update based on some like rather basic models of artificial intelligence. That's been around for quite some time. Diagnostic intelligence, where you look backward, you become a bit more intelligent, you look for patterns, you try to look for root causes, and software provides you with hypotheses on these root causes. That's a bit more advanced, but also nothing new. It's been around for a very long time. And I think where it gets more exciting, and it also sounds a bit more innovative, if you look at the use cases, it's predictive intelligence, where you apply patterns from the past and try to project where things are going. But then there is this huge gap. Those are the first 3 levels. That's what's around today already. And I think the next 3 levels, this is where a lot of innovation is happening right now, but also where some development still needs to take place. Intelligence, artificial intelligence that starts advising executives, recommending what to do, how to set up a strategy or different pillars of a strategy, but then also how to execute it. And then the big step where probably most teams would feel uncomfortable as of now is an active intelligence, even if it's with a clear mandate and certain kind of limitations, but an AI that makes decisions and even under certain supervision makes those kind of decisions and changes. This is, I think, where we have the big break, where also we with Workpath don't go really into. And then what a lot of people think about when we say AI in strategy, it's that complete autonomous intelligence that analyzes and decides without any human interaction. I think that's a pretty like utopian or futuristic view. We don't have to go there to leverage technology along the way and in our domain of strategy and strategy execution. So as I said, first 3, it's available today, but still AI does a great job right now in making analysis much more efficient. Just as one example, where organizations, and to be quite frank, consultancies in the past sent dozens or sometimes even hundreds of analysts into a company to collect data, to analyze data. That's where AI, in a diagnostic sense, and to some extent in a predictive sense, has a huge impact. Yeah, and it saves cost, it accelerates decision making. There is a lot. Yeah, and then at the intersection of the first and the second block of this model, this is, I think, where you really need to take everything with a grain of salt, and where we in Workpath, when we experiment with AI, also have constant discussions about how much can we also explain how the technology works, because you need to understand what kind of data is being used, how does the AI draw conclusions, where does this recommendation come from. I think that's the tricky part. And then last but not least, as you see, the first 3 models, obviously we've been working with for a long time, the first 3 stages, and advising intelligence, this is where we see most of the innovation happening right now, where Workpath, for you as a strategy owner or someone responsible for strategy execution, can actually make suggestions. It's like, have a look at this, something might not work there. Have you considered this? If we analyze the last cycles, this is what we learned about your organization. You might draw that conclusion from it. So at this intersection, as I said, I think this is where companies like Workpath can make a difference, and where a lot of innovation is taking place right now.
Yes, and so if you look at the entire cycle of strategy development and strategy execution, we thought it would be interesting to share with you a couple of points and bullets where we think we can apply AI, and then also discussing a bit about the context and data that's needed for that. So in the beginning, of course, when defining a strategy, AI can be used to analyze large data sets and make sense of the noise, right? Like really identify and measuring trends, market opportunities, but then also supporting in which bets to take, which path to take. As mentioned by Johannes, it's advising, it's not acting, it's advising. But this is one of the use cases where while you define your strategy, while you look at the whole broad picture, it can be innovative and analyze a lot of data for you. When communicating strategy, I think one of the interesting parts about that is that you can now suddenly personalize how you communicate to which stakeholder and which format, which message to do so, which obviously increases clarity and engagement across the organization. But thinking of a chatbot, for example, that explains to you in simple terms what the strategy is in your specific part, in your team, within a large unit and organization, that's a completely new way to interact and not only communicate, but also to consume strategy. When setting then annual goals and breaking down strategy cascadingly throughout the organization, AI can also help nudge for contribution and say like, well, this could be a part how your team and your organizational unit could contribute to the overall company strategy. It could also enable meaningful discussions within the team, within the unit to draft meaningful goals and also assist in clearly formulating them and really have a good discussions around. Yeah, it's not about setting goals for you, but it's enabling conversations so you can set the right goals in the best way. When aligning goals, it's also similar to when it comes to defining strategy. It can analyze a lot of data, recommend alignments, flag list misalignments, because it understands suddenly what the strategy is, how your goals are fitting in this strategy, and how they may also be at odds with other goals and other parts of the organization that you may not even be aware of, and can also prevent redundancies at a scale that has not been possible before. When reviewing this plan, this strategy execution plan, it can also highlight risks around this goal setting process, alignment, missing alignment, how you also distribute your resources and challenge you and help you to get a sense of whether that's how you want to align your budgets around the right goals, around the strategy, in order to prevent a poor execution then later on. And while you're executing your strategy, which is for most companies, hopefully the longest time, so planning takes a long time, of course, but executing is where the really meat comes in. Identifying potential risks and blockers early on, that's great to do with AI, analyzing tons of different data sources across different tools, products, to really understand what are the things that you should be discussing about that may not be clearly identified just through the human aspect of it, but then also recommending and coming up with mitigation actions, ultimately helping you to achieve your targets. And last but not least, when it comes to reflection and reviewing and adopting strategy, AI can be used to, on the one side, summarize this reflection across the entire organization, collect also learnings and also prompt for learnings that you would not otherwise have thought about or gotten about from the organization, in order to, when you go into the next strategy execution cycle, you have these learnings and you can apply these learnings in order to further improve your execution. And I think, as you can see, around from defining strategy to executing strategy to review and adapt your strategy, I think in all places, AI can be a wonderful tool to help you and enable you and empower the people making strategic decisions on all levels across the entire organization. It will not replace them, but it certainly will make them better, or like enable them to make the right decisions. And in order to enable this use case and all these different use cases along the different journeys, one thing is important, right? Like we discussed in the beginning a lot about the foundational models that are now available that can be used, but those models can only be applied if they have the right strategic context and the right data to be applied to. And so, for example, what we at Workpath in our product, we have a clear taxonomy of the different teams and the context that can be weighted so that the context that is most specific to you and most closest to you gets the highest weighting, whereas the maybe organizational strategy is a bit less clear and or weighted for your recommendations. And then putting that together with the artifacts, the strategic artifacts that we store in Workpath, and we help to track and monitor from the long-term strategy to KPIs, to goals, OKRs, initiatives. Really, like, we have all the different levels of strategy in our product. And then you can layer on top of that the different organizational contexts that you have. So which employees on your organization? What skills do you have? How do you distribute budgets? How's the collaboration between the strategic part of it? Which customer segments are you serving, and what needs are you looking into? So like lots of, we could probably extend this for another 30 minutes, the data points that we have, but I think these are the most critical ones for now. But then also having the relationship and the connections between these different data is incredibly useful context, because understanding how reporting lines look like, maybe one important connection, maybe the teams and organizational structures, especially in a matrix organization, could be completely different, and tracking those and having those also in Workpath is super helpful. But then really looking into also how outcomes are connected, outcome networks, value streams, and how the collaboration around outcomes, rather than on a fixed reporting line or an only merely an org structure, that is really informative information and can be used as strategic context in order to make the best possible recommendations in order to help you in the strategic planning phase as well as in the strategic execution phase.
I think that's just a great moment to see now that the foundation models are powerful enough. We don't have to train them on like data from all customers or even bigger. We can work with them. And then because we are in this space and because we work with mostly large enterprises, it's really powerful already if you just apply this within one organization. Yeah? So the longer one organization works with Workpath, the more insights, the more wisdom is in the organization, in the system, and the better also these AI enhanced tools get. And the ways of working, I think, of our product and engineering team haven't changed at all. Yeah, we've been doing this for many years now. So along the process that Pascal showed, we understand the problems quite well, I think. And then it's really just about how can we now use the new technology to solve them even better. And the beautiful thing about it is once you start using it in your organization, it gets better and better, and it has this flywheel because we have these very specific data for this very specific problems. And I think that's a really cool thing to see right now working with that technology.
Yes. And it's just in a little excourse, but also on the topic of data, we used some of this data to also review and as Johannes mentioned in the beginning, for example, look into the planning behaviors across 40,000 different goals, 3,500 teams, 40 plus organizations, where we analyzed, can we predict goal achievement? We found, for example, defining clear accountability for goals increases achievement by 7%, measuring goals with actionable metrics and like really forward-looking metrics increases by another 5%, or aligning goals and having these connections between the different outcomes, both vertically as well as horizontally, increase the achievement rate by another 7%. I think this brings together the unique data sets that we have that we can use on the one side for new products in the AI space, but also that we can or have used in the past to also help organizations understand the business impact that Workpath and working with a clear strategy execution software like ours helps. And
we're exactly on that stage between stage 3 and stage 4 right now, right? Diagnostic intelligence helps us identify those patterns. And you can use this now to become more and more predictive, to see if you don't have clear ownership, if you don't have measurability in your goals, you most likely will not achieve important strategic goals. And then work with that and build on that to become advising and tell you, look, you need to work on the topic of ownership or data-driven and measurability or measurable ways of working. That's exactly the sweet spot where we're operating with our customers right now. Pascal, I think we promised to have a look at a couple of our features, some of them already deployed, some of them still in the lab, some of them, to be quite honest, also, of course, limited by how fast our customers are allowed to use different kind of tools. But let's have a look at a couple of features that we're experimenting with or that we're already using. And then I think we're also already coming towards the end.
Yes. So I think going a little bit along the same cycle that we previously shared, I think the first use case that we wanted to just like give you a practical example and inspiration maybe for your organization or for your products, as well as to engage with strategy in a completely new way, right? Like rather than having like huge PDF files sent out with long-term strategy and 10-year vision, what about flipping the script and rather having a conversational dialogue with our Workpath Copilot that you can ask, please explain me our vision for the company for the next 5 years. And then using AI to draw up on the long-term strategy that you have in place in Workpath, as well as the strategy goals and KPIs, answer those questions and help users across the entire organization to suddenly understand and much more be engaged much more with the strategy, asking also tricky and difficult questions, and having a completely new way to communicate also strategy and consume it, much more immersive.
How about drafting? How about writing goals? We touched upon it already. We don't think AI should write your strategy, of course, and even defining goals, defining target outcomes, for example, using OKRs. This is a creative act. This is a collaborative act of a team defining hypotheses. How can we have the biggest impact on our business KPIs? What kind of outcomes, what kind of value do we need to, and what can we create in the next 3, 4, 6 months? So this is not something that should or could be fully automated if you really want to have a functioning strategy execution process. But, and this is, I think, easier to understand if you already work with Workpath, we do have those information. Who's the customer? What kind of value? What kind of outcomes do you want to create for the customer? So we help teams gather the most important pieces of information. And once you have that, you can make suggestions, of course, if that's an outcome, if that's a vector, a hypothesis you want to optimize for, this could be a good metric, right? So AI in Workpath can suggest you what would be good metrics for a certain kind of outcome you already drafted. How could you measure progress? What would be a good feedback loop? And that's, by the way, something you can already try out also online, even if you're not a Workpath customer, a Workpath user in your company's strategy execution platform. We'll put some links here as well into the PDF in the end when we share the slides. So that's, of course, one of the first steps already if you want to experiment and get a sense for how AI in Workpath can work.
Yeah, and I think that's worth reiterating, right? Like it's one of the examples where we said we don't think AI can write OKRs or goals for you, but rather have you have a good conversation and challenge you and help or enable you once you have to find the different vectors. Who's the customer? What's the customer value that we want to provide? What's the future state or the impact that we want to have on this customer? And then help you formulate the OKR, come up with ways or suggest ways to how to measure success. But it's not about replacing or generating it for you, but rather with you, and enabling you to come up with good customer-centric and outcome-oriented OKRs. Another way to, and that's something especially for you if you've worked with OKRs quite a bit, is that you also have a lot of feedback, usually on OKRs, ways that you could maybe improve your objective. And these are things that based on a set of quality criteria that every customer has a little bit of a different one. Supporting that and using that as an input and then playing it out and having smart suggestions right within the drafting helps you to really eliminate or help to elevate the quality and the clarity of these goals and really help everybody to better understand what you're going after, and also then helps you to better align further down the road. And that's a very, I think, also an interesting part, because it can also be very customized, right? Like this is something that you as a customer, you have an understanding, and you have in your organization defined quality criteria most likely, and ways you formulate your goals and ways you want to communicate and what's important for you. And this is a great way with AI to build that in and give every user the power to directly leverage it and get suggestions right when they draft their most important priorities. AI can also be used to, as mentioned before, to raise conflicts, goal conflicts. When you're drafting and you're typing in your goal, immediately see if there are other parts of the organization that have a similar goal or have a similar semantic product or like a way of working. It can also look, of course, in the history and go back in time and say, okay, well, there's another team in another part of the organization that worked in a very similar goal in the past and has probably a lot of learnings. What about checking out that? What about aligning with them? And similarly, also recommending where you can contribute in your team. It can also be used AI in another practical example, and that's the second to last one that we wanted to share, to give you a quick summary. For example, our weekly summary that we send out every week to every user. That could include also ways to say, well, what are the highlights of last week? What are the things that you should focus on in the next week? What are things that changed or need your attention, based all on the semantic understanding of the entire, as mentioned, the entire strategy context around long-term strategy, KPIs, goals, initiatives, but then also drawing upon conversation and data that has been added or been tracked in other systems that we all integrate in one strategy execution platform to alert you about the things that you should focus on in the week, and also give you a quick recap without much screening through hundreds of different pages of PDF, but giving you right in your inbox every Monday morning a short strategy update that you can use then to also plan and focus on in the week. And then last but not least, something that's also available to not customers of Workpath is our virtual OKR coach that helps you with a couple of prompts from coming up with an OKR that really helps you in a conversational style to come up with OKRs, thinking about, okay, what are the KPIs that we want to drive? What are the problems we want to address this quarter? Helps you to ideate key results or even get feedback on your OKR. We'll also drop a link in the chat here, but that can also be used as what we call a virtual OKR coach to help you refine or streamline a couple of your drafts so far. And these, I think, wraps up our overall X-course or like practical examples. And what we want to, being mindful of the time, what we want to do in the last several minutes is open it up for Q&A, and then also have, I think, a couple of questions that we can start and get a sense. I think the first question that is more of a silly one. Do you think that which slides content from this online session was generated by AI? That's obviously in this case, we didn't use AI to generate slides, but of course we also used it a little bit to fine tune here and there. But you can see actually the work from real humans, at least for now, in this webinar.
But I mean, there's a picture actually in the first part of the slides. We're going to send them around, as I said. A picture which looks like photography, but was generated by AI. So there's a couple of Easter eggs. Of course, the slides was created by the team mostly, but a couple of those smaller things are in there. And again, it shows, I think, the beauty of it, but also the risks of it and how easy you can generate any kind of visual appearance now. Yeah.
Exactly. And then I think, like, looking forward, I think what would be interesting is to get a quick sense and poll for whether you have plans to use AI for your strategy planning or execution in your organization. I think that's something that we can quickly write another poll on.
Cool. Thank you very much. I hope today's session gave some inspiration, some impulses on that journey. And then there's a last question or last bunch of 2 or 3 questions just to give feedback and for us to understand maybe any open questions we can answer now or feedback you would like to share for the session. That would be extremely helpful if you could give us a couple of seconds there. And again, we still have 5 minutes left. Please, if you have anything you would like us to discuss, any questions, use the chat, not just the poll here with the predefined questions, and we're here to discuss them. Okay, while you're still answering the poll, again, the slides will be shared, and just a couple of next steps, first steps for you. You will find a link to the OKR generator that you were introduced to today. Also, the OKR coach that Pascal explained. You can find following a link. Maybe I'll just put all of the links here once again. And of course, also really important, we have a co-creation program. Pascal and his team really likes working closely with people in our customer base, mostly that want to experiment with AI, that want to give feedback, that maybe want to be the first to use it with their teams. So there's also a link, the third one in this list, to sign up and become a part of that co-creation program. I think that would be really cool if we can have some more interested pioneers to join us there. And then last but not least, something that we do a lot is in-house sessions, brown bag sessions. We're facilitating discussions. Just next week, we're having a couple of CIOs visiting us at our offices. We also can come to you. So we really enjoy facilitating that kind of debate and brainstorming together. If there's any way we can interact with you, we can work with you on AI cases. Also, just reach out to Pascal, shoot us an email, and we're always curious to chat if there's something we can do together. All right. So we're following up individually. If there's any, I think 1 or 2 demos were scheduled in the chat. Any questions that we can maybe answer bilaterally, we will follow up. Beyond that, thank you very much for your time. I think it's a wrap. Last minute has started. And in the slides, you'll also see an outlook to one of the upcoming sessions from the Workpath Labs. If you are a customer, if you work with our technology, we would really be interested in what you would like to dive deeper into, what kind of insights into our product development, into our product labs we could give you. But again, that's something for after the session, and you'll find everything you need in those slides. Thank you very much. Thanks for your time. Really appreciate it.